Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
For more than a century, automakers continually honed their gas and diesel engines, sparring over which had greater power, better fuel efficiency, more durability, or delivered a smoother ride. Now, though, some of the world's biggest car companies are sending the combustion engine to the scrap heap and pouring billions of dollars into electric motors and battery factories. The transition is hardly noticeable yet on showroom floors, but it is upending the automotive workplace, from the engineering ranks and supply chain to the factory floor. That's what we're looking at today, and talking about not only how this behind-the-scenes transition is taking place, but also the rush to build EV charging stations coming without a promise of profit, according to one Wall Street Journal article. That said, any conversation on electric vehicles and the internal combustion engine simply wouldn't be complete without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, what we're seeing, I think, is a lot of differences in how we're going to get there. Not that we're not going to eventually get there, but what path should we take? And this is the discordant change that is happening. And that is our word for the day, discordant. It is an adjective, 3 syllables, D-I-S-C-O-R-D-A-N-T. And it means not in harmony, disagreeing, or conflicting. And as I read these two articles, that's what I get. It's like, okay, we have these ideas, but are they the best ideas? But we also have to then do some of these things to change people's minds, like your one and only friendly redneck liberal, who maybe is done taking long road trips, but still thinks that they might. And so I need a power station every 30 miles because I don't know when I'm going to want to take off and go and fill up.
In some ways, this whole discussion reminds me of this age-old thing it seems like we talk about on The State of Us, which is we think that certain things are new, but in reality, they're not really that new. A bit of a history lesson, right, Lance? Mm-hmm. Electric vehicles are actually really not a new thing. And in fact, they were once, way back at the dawn of the automobile, in direct competition with the internal combustion engine, right?
That's exactly right. And you highlighted the same things I did. We read these articles in different rooms, and that's exactly what I was going to point out, that 100 years ago, there was a direct competition. And if not for the new starters and power and different things that were done by the internal combustion engine, we might have been driving electric vehicles low these many years.
Yep. And actually, they note at one point, the cars that were powered by electric motors actually outnumbered those running on gasoline in the U.S. So anytime that somebody says, oh, that'd be crazy for us to have more electric vehicles than gas-powered vehicles, well, no, it wouldn't, because we actually already did it.
We've already been there.
We've already been there. Already happened. And the main factor became the availability of electricity was substantially less than the availability of gasoline, which ultimately proved decisive, along with some advancements in starter technology that made gasoline cheaper and therefore also easier and more accessible than electric was.
And another major factor was Henry Ford creating his assembly line,
right,
and mass producing gas-powered cars, which then were cheap enough, and everybody said, oh, well, this must be the way to go. And it necessarily wasn't the most efficient, but it was the cheapest. And there you have it, right? The history, 1914.
And we basically all forgot about electric vehicles, and over the decades, attributes such as, how big is this engine? What shape is it? How is it being
my hands
cooled?
Just got sweaty. They talk about the Jaguar Straight Six and the Chevy Small Block V8.
You're like, oh,
I'm
man.
Oh, yeah. Let's go, baby. Let's go for a ride right now.
So, but the point is that became the stuff, right, that everybody focused on, and we kind of forgot about this idea of electric propulsion.
Well, and then we also, too, the other thing that, the downer here for those cars is the Clean Air Act of 1970. So, I mean, when you talk about the whole concept of environment, and protecting the environment. Here in 1970, one of the first challenges of the gas guzzler era, we added catalytic converters, because I'm old enough to buy leaded gasoline. I mean, I didn't buy it, but I was with my grandpa when we bought leaded gasoline. We added catalytic converters to reduce the fumes, fuel injection systems to boost power and efficiency, and more gears to the transmissions to help engines run more efficiently. So, this isn't like, it's like you're saying, this isn't new. We've been trying to do a better job helping the environment for the last 50 years and keep gas-powered cars around. And we've roughly doubled the mileage from 13.1 miles per gallon in 75 in models from 1975 and to 25.7 in the model year 2020. But all of that has been done basically to not, it has lessened the problem, but it hasn't solved the problem. And that's the key, I think.
Yes. And the big notable thing here is, right, we've heard about the history, but GM, Volkswagen, and other car makers have basically announced that they are no longer setting aside any significant portion of money for developing new engines. And in fact, this article opens with a gentleman who spent basically his whole career at Ford Motor Company, developing internal combustion engines and improving efficiency. But he ended up retiring recently because he said his projects were no longer about advancing the internal combustion engine, just nursing along existing technology. All the buzz had shifted to electric vehicles, and in December of 2020, he took early retirement at age 59. He said it got to feel like you're on a maintenance crew. And later in the article, they note that a different engineer said, it does seem like we've run out of ideas. In other words, there is a point, right, where you hit whatever the pinnacle of a technology is. And a lot of these engineers and evidently car companies feel like we're capping out, on what can be done with an internal combustion engine. We are at near top end of the most power for the least fuel that we can possibly do, right?
We've made cars lighter, the engine's stronger, the engine's more efficient. There's nothing else we can do. We can't.
Burns cleaner.
Right.
We've done what there is to be done. And there may be some small gains to be made, but there's not going to be any giant leaps forward in internal combustion technology.
And there's nothing new in the pipeline for us to continue to work with. There's no new idea out there for me to continue to try to work with. Right.
And by comparison, Ford Motor Company and GM have also both each independently announced that they are going to invest $30 billion over the next decade into electric vehicle technology. So the reason that it's notable, right, is, and then you see the unions coming into play, there's a concern about, well, there's going to be job losses, right? And some estimates do put job losses with electric vehicles around 30%. But it is important to note that while it's not a one-to-one shift, there are new jobs being created while the focus shifts more toward software, right? And software engineering for these vehicles than from the actual design of an electric motor. I mean, electric motors are nothing new either, right? We've had electric motors for over a century. These are not a new concept, and they're all over the place. I mean, right? Have you ever seen a fan? Electric motor, right? I mean, it's a small scale version, but one of the reasons that electric motors are deployed in so many capacities is because of the incredibly low maintenance and low likelihood that something's going to go wrong with them over their lifspan.
Well, I grew up with an electric mower.
Same.
I mean, we had an extension cord and I plugged it in, but my mower when I was a kid growing up was electric. My weed eater is now battery powered and charge it with electric. I've got a chainsaw that does the same thing. So this whole battery powered idea has always been and has really wormed its way in lately into the friendly redneck liberal's life. When I go out and do a chore, other than my gasoline powered engine and my cars, everything else is running on battery packs.
And you don't sit there yanking away trying to start this darn thing and dislocate your shoulder, right? Because there is none of that. It is a direct power to the motor. There is no, the starter, right? The basic concept is the starter in the vehicle ignites, so to speak, the engine, which allows you then to start the vehicle and generate power. The concept behind any battery-powered item is that we have stored the power already, and now all we're doing is just using the power. There is no, which is kind of weird because, they call them like remote start, right? In your, they're called ICE vehicles, by the way. The lingo is short for your internal combustion engine, ICE.
Ice, baby.
Yes. Right. Yep. Because you got EVs, right? Electric vehicles, and then you have ICE vehicles.
ICE vehicles.
Yes,
right.
Which are internal combustion.
I learned
engines.
something
So
today.
there you go. So in your ICE vehicles, right? Because I saw this like, I don't know, started showing up 10, 20 years ago, where you had on your remote, right? You could start the vehicle remotely so that it would warm up and get ready to go, and remote start. Well, now on electric,
I got one of those.
On
my truck. My truck does that. I don't use it, but it does that.
But you could do it.
Yeah.
Well, Lance doesn't believe in climate control, so I suppose if you don't believe in climate control, it doesn't. You
just live with the means. You just live with whatever the weather's throwing at you.
But on your electric vehicles, you have this thing called precondition. Okay, because the whole notion is you're not starting, like, you know what I mean? The electric motor doesn't run unless you press the accelerator. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, because you're just drawing energy from the battery, right? So there is no, because in an electric vehicle or in a ICE vehicle, right, the motor has to run to give you power to do the things inside that don't have anything to do with the vehicle going down the road. Right? They charge the 12-volt battery, which in turn lets you power your various things and run things like climate control and heat, right? It's not going to happen at all if the engine's not on, because that's how we
turn
get
the radio on. We got rid of the crank windows. Now you got electric windows and electric
up
locks.
and down. Yep. So you got to have all this power.
By the way, I don't like that either.
Yeah, of course not.
I wish I had my hand crank window back.
Really?
Yeah. Because now I have to turn the car on to adjust the window. Yep. Whereas before, I just crank her down, up, whatever I wanted while I was sitting there waiting for somebody.
But that is an important note, is that your EV doesn't waste any energy, right? Because if your ICE vehicle's sitting there and it's the winter and you're warming up the inside, right? You are running the engine unnecessarily because the vehicle's not going anywhere, but you're still using, power from the engine that's just basically not doing anything. In an EV, that's not happening, right? You're only using the power in which you need in that moment.
So how do you defrost the car of an EV?
You precondition it and the heater comes on. But it's a heater that's separate because the electric motor...
What's preconditioned mean?
It's, remote starting it. Same idea. Yeah. I mean, you have defrost, right? You have climate control just like you do. The difference is that you have a toaster oven heater in an EV, like a space heater, that you turn on. It's the same principle, where in an ICE vehicle, you're actually using heat from the engine. On the AC side, it's identical, right? You basically have a heat pump is what it's called, right? And it's a compressor that makes the AC possible. Works the same way. So, I guess I should say not on all EVs. Some use different technologies, but generally speaking, you're only ever going to use the power you need in the moment. Your electric motor is never just running on idle, right? It doesn't do that. It's you send power to it and you go forward or backwards. And if you're not sending power to it, then you're sitting still. And that's how it works. Just like think about your fan, right? You plug it in and it'll run. And if you unplug it, it quits running, right? And it's not using any power if it's plugged in and off. It's just sitting there. So that's kind of the way to think about the one of the substantive differences. But that's really where you're seeing the shift in the industry, Lance, is in the back end, right? They note only 5% of U.S. car sales are EVs right now. So you're not seeing it on the showroom yet, but we know that you got to make the changes in the back end before you really start seeing all these big changes on the front end. So let's talk about this charging station thing. Okay, great. These car companies are going to force me into getting an electric vehicle. I don't want one. I don't like change. Doesn't matter that it costs less. Doesn't matter that it's going to save me time. Doesn't matter. I don't want it, but I got to get it because they're going to change it whether I like it or not. So I'm going to get one. But now what am I going to do about this freaking charging thing? What are we going to do? Well, to find out, keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
So you're out there with your ICE vehicle, your internal combustion engine, chugging along, blowing that black smoke, having a good time, and then you realize, I guess I'm going to get an EV. What about this charging thing? Am I going to be able to go anywhere? Am I going to be chained, charging, wasting all this time? What do you think, Lance? How's this going to work out, this charging station issue? I think you said it really well before the show, the point of the article. Do we really need all these charging stations that they're going to build? Do we really need them all?
Well, here's the thing. Without more stations, most of the people who are proponents of electric vehicles are worried that people will continue to avoid electric cars. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg dilemma is the way they're saying. If we don't build the stations, nobody's going to buy the car and you have to build a certain kind of station, right? Because that's what I've learned over the last 6 months to year and a half talking about this, is that some stations are slow charging or there are fast charging stations that can repower your battery in 30 minutes or less instead of hours. And some of the cars can't even take them that fast, but it's that whole concept of, well, what if I want to drive more than 50, 75, 100, 200 miles, which is, the current EVs only travel a few hundred miles or less before needing to plug in. So there's this argument among the people who want me to buy an EV that you need to build the stations first. And then when I see how easy it's going to be to recharge my batteries, then I'm going to be less hesitant to buy one. And for me, fact. I mean, I hate to say it because I pride myself on being a critical thinker and able to, look through the minutia. But that is something that, and again, I'm changing over time. I'm becoming more and more open to that idea. But it still would benefit my concern if I saw more of these stations around, or if I understood the technology and how easy it would be to put one of these plugs in at my home to charge it in the driveway, because I don't know how that works. And again, we fear what we don't understand, right? We fear what we don't know. And so I think this is part of it, but the other part of it, and we talked about this, and this is where you agree, right? Is when I talk about my daughters, they both rent apartments and their apartment buildings don't have a place for them. So they would love to right now, today, go out and buy an EV because they think that is the wave of the future. They are very much worried about conservation. They also understand it would save them money, which in their young careers is very important to them. They want to buy an EV, but they're like, Dad, where do I charge it? My apartment complex has nothing available to me.
And that's where, in my mind, right, the biggest investments are needed in two areas. There are your urban areas where you have people who at their home, right, where they live, they don't have access to charging because they don't own the property, right? In other words, they're renting. So it's not up to them per se to make that decision. So I think that's critical. The other place that's critical is in your rural settings, right, where you may have to go long distances and you're not near an interstate and you're going to need these stations in order to make that happen. The places that I don't think we need to spend a boatload of money are along the major interstates, because just telling people, and having owned EVs now for 2 years, and we don't own, I mean, this just changed. I don't know if it was the last time we did an episode on EVs or the time before that, but we don't own any longer an internal combustion engine vehicle in my household. We had one ICE, and one EV for a while, but those days are gone and we're all electric. And never once yet, and I say that because I'm sure it's possible, have I looked at a trip or something that I wanted to do and said, I can't do that because I have an electric vehicle?
Yeah, but we did a show about a year ago, and correct me if I'm wrong. The problem was there was a gentleman who did just that.
It takes longer.
And it takes me longer. And it took him almost 50% longer to make the same trip to see his mother from the West Coast to the East Coast than it did in his ICE car.
And the problem, though, and this is where I think this is where the disconnect is. It's not because there aren't enough charging stations. It's because most of the EVs that are on the road right now today don't charge at a rapid enough rate.
You have to have the battery technology that will allow you to charge it in the 30 minutes, and let's face it, folks, right? I mean, here's a person who's gone from beta to VCR to DVD to streaming, right, in my lifetime. Just because we now have the technology that takes 30 minutes, in my mind, we're eventually going to have something that takes just as long or less
5-10 minutes
than it does to pump my gas tank full of gas. So I'm wrapping my head around it, and I know that that's going to improve, and so what I like, and I haven't been traveling a lot because of the pandemic. I haven't traveled at all because of the pandemic. But as I make out my wish list of trips that I'd like to take once everybody gets vaccinated and we whip this COVID-19 thing, more and more hotels are building it, which to me, who likes to travel in their car, who likes to have that independence and freedom, it's like, oh, well, my favorite hotel chain that I like to stay when I travel, they have EV charging stations. So as I park for the night after I go out and eat dinner, I can plug in, and when I wake up the next morning, I have a full charge on my car.
Well, it's a change in the way you think about when you add the energy your car needs to go, right? Because the way that we've all been trained for decades and decades is that you go to a place to spend time adding fuel to your vehicle so that then you can go places, right? In other words, that's part of the process. You must make a trip to a place to get the stuff you need to go to other places. Whereas with electric vehicles, it requires a little bit of a rethinking, and that's what you're seeing with hotels and stuff is, well, we got electricity here, right? I mean, we're not going to go through the EPA stuff of digging some, giant hole in the ground and putting in a tank and going through, and have this pump and have gas delivered. And oh my gosh, huge expense, massive undertaking, and probably not worth it because we can't give it to people for free because gas costs too much, right? I mean, we're not going to give away gasoline to these folks at our hotel, but we could give them free charging because from empty to full, on average, right, a hotel is probably going to spend somewhere between $3 and $8 to give somebody a full charge.
They charge you $10 more for the room. You don't even notice it.
Right.
And you have that amenity.
And you're getting, quote unquote, free charging. But the point is, it can charge while you're not doing anything, right? So in other words, I get back to the hotel at night, I plug it in, I go to my room, I come back the next morning and we go. And I didn't take quote unquote extra time to drive down the street, go to the gas station, and then go do what I wanted to do. Right.
Oh, I don't know how many times I've left an hour before departure time from the hotel to take care of what you just said, to get everything filled up, topped off, ready to go for the next day's trip before everybody else was ready to go. And now I've just saved that time. And to your point, you even showed me traveling to my favorite ballpark, that within walking distance of the ballpark is a lot where I could pay to park my EV and charge the car for my return trip home while I'm at the ballpark. Wow. I mean, it's like, again, it's just a rethinking of an age-old strategy.
Yeah, because, you have to think about it this way, right? We have to park all of our vehicles somewhere. The question becomes, do I want to charge before I get to where I'm going or while I'm at what I'm doing? And that is a benefit.
Which is EVs. A time, we were talking about saving time. That's a time-saving benefit instead of a time-spending benefit that EVs offer us that ICE vehicles don't.
And we're seeing the range change constantly. I mean, I guess the point that Lance is getting at is the EVs that I have, right, which are Chevy Bolts, just for people that don't know, we've talked about this before. they're not fast charging experts, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, oh yeah, I fill it up just as fast if I go to a fast charger. Nope. I got to spend more time doing that. But the reality is, my husband and I take, a few trips, maybe a year, where we have to do that. Because just as an example, we live in between Dayton and Columbus. He drives the EV to work every day. He can go to work, twice, and we charge at home, and he never goes to a fast charging station, right? And I mean, he commutes 50 minutes to work, and there is no gas station equation in our lives, no stopping for that. You get home at the end of the day, plug her in, go inside, come back in the morning, unplug it, and go, right? And I spend, 30 seconds maybe doing that versus 5 to 10 minutes at the gas station. And that may not sound like a big difference, but you add that up over the year, you spend a lot of time, and that's just at the gas station, right? Not the time that I had to spend going to the gas station or the gas that I spent going to the gas station. So as those things improve, this road trip thing, which I think is a built-in lure of America, right, is going to improve to make people feel more comfortable, even if in reality, you would be fine right now, because there are vehicles coming out that, you're going to fully charge in 30 minutes. Okay, well, my vehicle, which isn't even very old, is like an hour, right? So we're already making leaps, and it's already been a few years. And now you got Ford and GM saying, we're going to put $60 billion collectively into this. They're going to get it down.
Well, and as they do it, we haven't even talked about this, the price for the vehicle will drop.
Exactly.
Because the more they make, which is, the reason why we have
Henry Ford,
gas-powered cars with Henry Ford, right? Because he can make them cheaper. So the models are going to become not as price prohibitive.
So we're gonna talk about, I mentioned the Chevy Bolt, the recall. EVs are catching fire. Oh my God, you guys said these were going to be great, and it's going to catch fire, and it's going to kill me and burn down my house, and oh boy, what are we going to do? Well, to find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Willer.
Big news, Lance. Big news. GM, General Motors, big car company, right? I think we've heard of them before. They make a car called the Chevrolet Bolt EV and the Chevrolet Bolt EUV. And they started with the, I believe, 2017 model year. That was the first time they made it. And they have through the 2022 model year available right now. And they are recalling every single Bolt that has ever graced a consumer's hands. I don't know what, seat, butt, whatever, that anybody's ever had possession of.
So your two cars have been recalled.
They have been. Yes, they have. Because they might catch fire. They might melt. That whole Samsung thing from a few years ago, right? People's phones were catching fire. Yeah. Oh my God, batteries, right? Well, in case you didn't know, that can happen with batteries. However, I think this part's very important. There are, I believe, in the neighborhood of about 160,000 Bolts on the road today, right? So not ones that have been manufactured and aren't being used yet. We're not talking dealer lots, in consumers' hands, right? Consumer-owned vehicles, about 160,000. There have been, and depending on when you listen to this, it might be different, there have been 8 that have caught fire. Now, I'm not minimizing that, because I'm sure that if my vehicle caught fire sitting in my driveway,
if you're one of the 8, that was huge.
I'd probably freak out a little bit.
What if it was in your, here's
in your garage.
In the garage that started a fire that burned your house to the ground.
Sure.
But I've had friends that has happened to with their gas-powered car, because the exhaust system was so warm, and where they parked and they were touching something or oil or something sparked a fire inside the garage and the fire department traced it back to the vehicle.
The reason that I'm not screaming bloody murder and telling people they shouldn't buy a Bolt EV is because this is a manufacturing defect in a very small percentage of battery cells in these vehicles. And you notice I said defect, right? I mean, this is an error that occurred. In other words, it was engineered a certain way. And in the process of making it, there was a mistake that caused it to do this. So not even the whole battery, just a couple cells in some batteries in some bolts. Now, again,
8 to be total. 8 bolts to be exact.
Yeah, to be exact. Now, there shouldn't be any, right? Because it was engineered properly. The manufacturer screwed up. But the reason that's significant is the fires that you hear about with internal combustion engine vehicles are not engineering flaws, right? Almost never. They're almost always the result of simply an acceptance of the type of technology you're using. You generate a boatload of heat, right? And you set this thing near or around something and it catches fire, overheats, or is related to human error, right? In other words, I didn't put any coolant in my vehicle. It ran out of coolant and it overheated and it caught fire. And that's my fault, not the vehicle's, right? I mean, that's just how it is. The point is that even taking all this into account, the rate at which all ICE vehicles are likely to combust versus the rate of even taking all the EV fires together, the EVs are still less. And that's a defect in their engineering, right? Or not in their engineering, a defect in the manufacturing, the engineering sound. So I think that's an important note is you don't have to be scared of the technology. The technology is not the issue. The active cooling system is designed to handle what the temperature of the battery could realistically be under the circumstances, assuming the battery was properly assembled. And in this instance, it was not.
Well, we're going to give you breaking news here on True Chat. This is the first time this has ever come out of the friendly redneck liberal's mouth to anyone.
Oh my gosh.
And that is, I am not planning on buying a new vehicle the rest of my life. I like what I have. Not planning on living, long enough to, another 10 or 15 years to buy a new car when I'll actually be driving. But if I do, here's the news break. Here's the news flash. I'm convinced to buy an EV. Might be a truck. Yeah. I like some of the new trucks that are out. But if the friendly redneck liberal buys a new automobile, it will be an EV. Now, I'm not saying I will buy an EV because there are no plans in my future driving career to buy another car. I like what I have.
But we know you like buying new cars.
But the minimal amount but I like my money right now. So new cars are expensive, whether they're ICE cars or EVs.
You win the lottery, it might be a different story.
But the next vehicle I buy, now I will still have 1 or 2 ICE vehicles in my driveway.
Comfort blanket.
But I am there now. I believe in it enough that it has some value to me that to do one of these things. So the next vehicle that yours truly buys will be an EV.
I think one of the greatest things is, just as you were saying that, I was just thinking about your truck, your Dodge, and I was thinking, it's probably, when you buy a truck, right, you're not thinking about the 0 to 60 time. I mean, let's be honest, right? That's probably not like, oh yeah, it's going to be great. I mean, maybe 7 or 8 seconds if we're being generous.
Still pretty badass, but yeah,
7 or 8 seconds. I mean,
I don't drive that way anymore. I've got my Mustang or my wife's Mustang.
When I learned that the new Hummer, Hummer's a big vehicle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a honker. This is like,
and I don't want something like that. But anyway,
but if you get a Hummer, right, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? When you read about these things.
But, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm just seeing Lance, roll up in his new Dodge, his Dodge EV, right? And here he goes, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds in a truck.
I've got, you're going to have to put new gravel down on the road into the True Chat. I'm going to be tearing up the gravel. I mean, after 3 or 4 years now of talking about this, I'm convinced to the fact that if and when I buy a new vehicle, I want it to be an electric vehicle. 1, it's good for the environment. 2, I'm sold on the safety. And 3, I really think that the travel is a misnomer in my head. I mean, it takes me a while, folks, but your redneck part of your redneck liberal here can change.
Yeah, I think right now it's a pretty good no-brainer. If you commute less than 200 miles round trip, right, in a day, and you own a home, this is I think it's an easy sale, right? It should be.
Whether you commute or whether you're that person who takes the children around.
Yes.
If you drive less than 200 miles a day,
yep.
This should be right now in your future.
Yeah.
Next time you buy a vehicle,
you're going to save money.
Because you're going to have choices too, right?
Yeah.
Before you could get the Chevy Volt or you get a Tesla.
Right.
I mean, I know there were others, but that's basically it. But I think we read one of the articles, GM has 35 models or something
on the horizon
that they're coming out with.
And that's GM.
Right.
Right. And then you got Ford and they're putting 30 billion in and they got models coming out. So, I mean,
and we did a show on there are companies we haven't even heard of who are getting into the electric car market. They're not even car manufacturers, but they're companies that are being created just to produce electric cars. So the choices are going to be immense in the next 2 to 5 years. I mean, you're going to, like you said, you can get a Hummer, you can get a pickup truck, you can get a new muscle car Mustang, that is faster than, the 6-speed manual transmission that I have, V8 engine, that's actually faster off the line than that. So it's like, once we get all these choices, it's not like you have to drive a little box car because that's all that they make. They're going to make everything you could ever dream of in an electric vehicle.
I think Tesla's forthcoming Roadster, Lance, they said the point of it is excess. The point of it is not practical. The point of it is to prove definitively that electric is better. And it will do, they're projecting, 0 to 60 in, I believe, 1.3 seconds. I think you'd almost pass out.
Be just like on that, just like be on one of those amusement park rides.
Right. Yeah, you better be ready.
Thrill seeker every time you start your car.
Keep your head against the headrest, right?
Start wearing helmets in the car.
Yeah. So why do we have this conversation today, Lance? What was the point? We're trying to tell people that you and I come from a background of gas vehicles. And I mean, in fairness to you, right? It's not like I made this plunge all at once. I mean, we got one and we had the same hesitations that you've mentioned, that other people have mentioned, right? How are we going to get places? What's it going to be like? We got one and we kept our gas vehicle, and that let us spend a year with it. And then we said, hey, we're good.
Why?
We don't need this. Yeah, right. We can do this, So,
well, but that's part of our mission here at True Chat, and that is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. All right. And that's what we've had about this. And you can see over the years, when presented with the facts, even yours truly can make the change. And that's what we're trying to get across, is that, folks, we can talk honestly and respectfully to one another, and we can change our minds. And it's okay. It's not called flip-flopping. You can actually change your mind because you become more educated about a topic. Today it was EVs. Sometimes it's the Supreme Court. Other times it's Afghanistan, but that's what we do here every day on the show. And you need to tell your family and friends about it. And when they say, well, where can I find this very interesting concept going on? Tell them they can find our show on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time as a podcast. You can also hear our program in select AM and FM talk radio station markets across the country, so be sure to check your local station. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.